sharing in my theories of Fire Emblem Engage, and I'm not the only one who's thought this, getting 12 emblems for the villain's team. I think that the villain, or the Fell Dragon himself, will wield 12 emblems to fight off against our 12 emblems that will push us into a new phase of the war. Because we're going into a battle that we've already won. Alir and the emblems have already sealed or defeated in some way the Fell Dragon. So when we go back there as Alir with the 12 emblems, there needs to be a new threat. And I'm hoping that that is 12 villainous or 12 anti-emblems or whatever it's going to be called. It would also give us a way to engage more with the villain's team because the 12 emblems would have their 12 wielders. So we would have something similar to like the Dead Lords or something, like 12 villains that we're scared of for the whole game or that we see a few times that build up as villains. So that towards the end when we have to fight them off for real, or if they are NPCs that we're fighting in the final fight or whatever, there's something like kind of scary there. I don't think they'll give us something where we have the final boss and then 12 minions who all have engages, because that would be tough, and Fire Emblem is kind of going down on how tough they want to be usually. But I do think that we'll get 12 characters that build up throughout the game. And then obviously, like a lot of people are predicting that there will be DLC engages or post-game or something. Maybe there will. But for now, I'm running on the assumption that we get 12 and the villains will also get 12 and they will mirror ours. And now the big question I think that we have to ask is, are we just going to get a bunch of dragons? Because most Fire Emblem villains are dragons. But if the Fell Dragon is engaging, then maybe they won't be dragons. I'm kind of thinking we'll get dragons in like their human forms. So really what it's kind of boiling down to is, for Marth's antithesis, for his anti-emblem, are we getting Garnif, a really powerful and fearsome mage, or are we getting Medius, who's straight up the Earth Dragon, Shadow Dragon, the really fearsome foe that Marth had to defeat? I don't know which one we get really, so it's definitely an exciting thought for me. Really, I'm leaning more toward the side that we are getting the dragons, but in their like human or vessel form, when that's appropriate. I don't think they'll all be that way, but I think they'll be scaled down. But the Fell Dragon has a human form in this game as well, so I'm thinking that that'll be a point of conversation, where he'll be trying to wake up their dragon sides, or using their draconic powers to wake up his. So that puts us with, and I'm pretty confident, Medius as a humanoid for Marth's big fight. Maybe not as well loved as someone like Hardin, but I think fits it a little bit more. For Celica, it's a little tougher, because if it was Alm, I would just think like, oh, what if they use the witch version of Celica and it's sad. But for Celica, there's Jeddah, who's that like really creepy, I don't even know what you would call him, that creepy dude. But you could also use Duma and keep another dragon with a humanoid form. That's what I think they would go with. But I don't think they'll all be dragons, because if you have Sigurd there and you don't put Arvis, something is wrong. Then something is wrong. And I know that Julius is like the final villain of that game, but Arvis and Sigurd, it's kind of a huge thing, and they picked Sigurd. They didn't put Salif, even though Salif is usually the icon they use. They use Sigurd, so I think Arvis would be the best option. For Leaf, this one, I'm ready to be wrong. But I think we'd get Reinhardt. And at first I thought, haha, because Reinhardt's a meme. But really, he, first off, is that whole, like, kind of popular, that popular role of Kemu. Basically, the character who is so loyal to their country and those beliefs that even if they're a good person, you will be forced to kill them because they're not going to put down their weapon and they're not going to back down until the bitter end. And Reinhardt he follows suit with that, but he also got really popular in Heroes. And again, at first I thought it was just the meme, and it kind of is. But to a lot of Heroes players, he's one of the first powerful mages you meet, one of the first powerful villains that they actually trained up, and he was the first meme they had in the Fire Emblem community, of course. So to a lot of people, he checks several first boxes that build actual emotional connections. So it is kind of a meme, but it became so much more than that I could see them actually putting him in this game, especially since some things in it, already the colors of the weapon wheel and stuff, are a little Heroes-esque. So then for Roy, hopefully Eden, again, dragon, but also very memorable, very cool. For Lyn, it's a little harder. Blazing Blade, I mean, Zephiel is not exactly the big bad, but his descent is sort of a huge deal. So I think that's who we'd get, but like, I don't know, maybe Nurgle. But I'm gonna stick with Zephiel. I think he would be more satisfying to have on the emblem, on the villainous emblem wheel. Erica from Sacred Stones is obviously getting Leon, and there's two ways they could go about it. One is Formitus could already be possessing him, so he's humanoid, but he's actually like this big demon being thing. Or two could be their emblems. So Leon isn't really a bad guy, but emblems have no connection to the physical world. So when someone puts it on that ring and asks for his help and his power, he might be misled. He might have been lied to. Maybe when you defeat his wielder, maybe kill the guy that's using that emblem, he actually shows sympathy and he's like, yeah, I'm not going to engage with anybody else in this world because like this got bad. I don't know. I think that he could be a good character that uses the villainous emblem wheel. Or maybe they just get to him with his ideals and he starts doing some shady things and it gets easier and easier. First one's more likely. Just use the demon mind control. Why would you not use demon mind control? This is Fire Emblem. Ike, Black Knight. I mean, there's never a better option for an Ike villain. Plus, it gives us a villain with heavy armor to fight. For Micaiah, maybe there we could actually get a Shira. She is kind of like an actual god, so that's a little bit tough, but Micaiah doesn't really have like a solid villain other than like she has a rivalry with Ike. Maybe you could play her on, but I think Ashir is kind of the bigger choice there. So then we get into Awakening, and this is another one where they didn't actually choose the main character, but I've thought of several reasons to cope with why. And this one I think is the strongest because Wallheart is a really good Crom foil, right? But if you're looking for the biggest and scariest villain from Awakening, that's definitely Grima. And Crom's whole thing is he wants to change fate and help Grima. He actually believes that if they seal Grima for 1,000 years, maybe they can fix things or whatever. Crom isn't so much on the kill Grima at any cost thing as much as Lucina is. And Lucina was chosen for the emblem wheel. So I think that we could get Lucina and Grima. And Lucina could be kind of on the camp of like, no, this guy has to die. There's no stopping him. Grima would of course not be in dragon form, but in the form of one of the Robins, but we have male Byleth on the wheel, and female Corrin on the wheel as well. So I think that they would be comfortable with putting a gendered version of Robin. For Fates, maybe Garen. Maybe just actually use Anonkos. That would be a little bit cooler, but Anonkos' physical form only shows up in the DLC, or humanoid form only really shows up in DLC. He's not even in Heroes yet, so they might not want to. So Garen might be more of a realistic option, but fingers crossed that they actually just use Anonkos because he kind of did start everything. And for the last villain that I think would make sense on a villain wheel, Three Houses is obviously a very controversial one to touch because people could argue that Edelgard takes the villain role of that game and even wears the red armor. Or Rhea, who actually manipulated a lot of events even before the game started, could be more of an actual antithesis or foil to Byleth. And maybe works for both the dragon side of most of this villain wheel and the whole manipulating and trying to repin history thing. But I think what I would love to see them do is use Shez. Because we've already gotten Byleth and Shez for Three Hopes, with Shez being the hero. And obviously they can team up and stuff, but what I would love to see is Fire Emblem engage, since we already know it's using Byleth, if they just use female Shez this time, just to switch it up. And because male Byleth, female Shez is my preferred grouping, so yeah, bias. But I think that Shez would be a great counterpart to Byleth, and there's a few ways you can go about it too, because you could say that they're from different histories, even though they're both from Three Houses, thus opening the door to this idea that yes, all the Three Houses routes will happen. And you could also have this Shez be the one that died or nearly died, or something like that. Or Shez could be full-on vessel for Epimenides. Shez, it's a little more subtle, but actually fits this whole like hero that is kind of a god or dragon thing. Shez Epimenides isn't a god, but it's a man that made themselves immortal by transferring his conscience person to person, to the point where he is also Arvel, who's like a genderless construct, because Epimenides is a consciousness, effectively, and Shez wields it. And when Shez uses it, they have this giant power up and glow and all that stuff. So I think that Epimenides really fits that like Fire Emblem godly villain thing that goes on. And I think that an Epimenides controlled Shez would be a great villain emblem to have, especially because you could do the same thing I was talking about with Leon. Shez is canonically, I love Shez, so I say this with respect, a little stupid. So if Shez is an emblem with no real connection to the world, but is told they'll be taken care of, they'll probably listen. So I think Shez kind of fits the villain role, and I'd love to see what they do with it. So those are my picks for who I think would be perfect for a villain emblem wheel. And I mean, from the beginning, I believed it would happen. A lot of people believed it would happen. But the more I think about it, the more sense it makes. And then the 12 picks they used make more sense, except for Lynn. Lynn's a little weird, but that's just because Lynn is only the tutorial main character, but she is an interesting lead and people like her, so they used her, so I get that. They also wanted it to be 6 men and 6 women, so that's why some of the choices were made. But I think that using what they used, there's a pretty good selection of characters that they can pull from to make this whole emblem wheel full of villains. So I'm really excited to see if that plays out the way I expect it to. But yeah, until then, thank you very much and take care.